Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. A few months ago, I was trying to troubleshoot the noise that's happening in the rear end of TDSR. As part of that process, I removed the rear drive shaft, just driving on the front one to see if that made the noise go away. It did actually make the noise go away, but it also let me understand that the front drive shaft is making a lot of noise on its own, and so the U-joints on that drive shaft need to be replaced. It took me a while since the front drive shaft's not mandatory. I put that on the back burner. It's been sitting in the garage, but with me waiting on the PCM for the TDSR to finally come in, which is a whole separate set of videos, I went ahead and replaced the U-joints on that front drive shaft. So I'm going to show you all that footage now and then throw it back on the Jeep, and so we can have a four-wheel drive vehicle again. Hopefully this is helpful to anyone who's looking to do some work on a double Cardan joint. It'd be my first time doing that. And as always, if the video helps, a thumbs up is great, and subscription to the channel is even more helpful for getting the channel to continue to grow. So thanks a lot, and let's get into the work.
Well, here we are again under the Jeep. This time we're looking at the end of the front drive shaft. I've got the transmission skid down so that I can get easy access to the back here of the front drive shaft. I'm sure it's not a surprise to you that TDSR continues to make weird noises, and I've got some weird clicking or something like that going on in the front, and I'm not sure if it's the drive shaft or hopefully not the transfer case. So I'm just taking the front drive shaft off and gonna run it in two-wheel drive to see what the issue might be. Also, the front drive shaft, I know the U-joints are bad, so I need to replace those. Another reason to just take it off and save that project for another day. I've already got the front of the drive shaft disconnected from the yoke at the front differential, so now I'm just going to disconnect it here from the transfer case.
Just before I start working on this, just to show you, you can't hear it or feel it, I know, but this is just super clunky and locked up. It is not smooth at all. It definitely needs a lot of work, and I'm glad that I'm going to be replacing the U-joints on this thing. I'm going to be taking a wire brush and trying to get all the rust off and repainting it, so I want to make some punched marks so I can get it all lined up even after I paint it. Oh. So this ball in the double Cardan, the needles are just, the whole thing is just completely dry. The needles are shot, they're just powder. So yeah, I think this might have been one major reason this front drive shaft was just not in happy shape. So good thing we're changing all this out. So for factory U-joints, with 204,000 miles on them, these really look pretty good on the race surfaces and in the caps. There's still grease in there, and the needles are all there. So I'm actually pretty impressed that these U-joints don't look far worse. But of course, this piece here in the center that I forget the name of offhand is completely dry and shot. And I think the number one reason that it is completely dry is that the slinger is completely busted, and this rubber is just totally gone, and it's not doing any good. So obviously it's going to dry right out and cause sorts of problems. So
Next, I am going to wire wheel this entire thing, get some of this rust off, clean it up. I have a new slinger as well as the new U-joints, so we should be able to get this looking in much better shape. So next part, clean up and paint. So this is what the surface looks like with that slinger taken off. As a point of comparison, this is the old slinger that I just took off. This is the new one. Clearly, a little bit of material missing between the old and the new. Alright, just to give you a quick scan, this is what it looks like, touched up, cleaned up a little bit before I paint it. You know, it's not going to win any prizes, but I got the surface rust off, got it buffed up a bit, cleaned out the bores where the U-joint caps will go, and now I'm just going to put a cover of Rust-Oleum black on it just to try to keep the rust off of it in the future. Now that the drive shaft is all painted and the paint has dried, it's time to start putting everything back together. The first thing I'm going to do is start with the grease slinger that goes on the double cardan end of the drive shaft. I found this 2-inch PVC pipe that it's oversized, but this should actually work to just rest it on the ledge, the lip, the metal lip, and help me seal it down better than using a screwdriver. And that seems to be working really well. And with the slinger installed, now we can move on to U-joints. The U-joints and the centering yoke that I'm going to be installing are Spicer brand, and I'll leave a link in the description for them. These are not the greasable U-joints or the centering yoke, and the reason for that is I don't trust myself to regularly do the lubrication, and I just wanted to get something I could basically install and forget. I don't envision this Jeep seeing a lot of action that is going to really put a lot of stress on these off-roading or just another 200,000 miles. So I think non-greasable fittings will be just fine for the lifetime of at least my owning this Jeep, and then I'll become said previous owner. One thing with these U-joints is that the instructions are really clear. Don't add additional grease to the caps because that could actually damage or limit the life of these joints. So I will not be adding additional grease to these as we go about installing them. And that's what it looks like when you get needle bearings along the bottom and it won't go together properly. You gotta take it apart, put needle bearings in, and try again. So now that I've got half the double cardan installed with this U-joint, I'll mention a couple of things. One, I picked up on a different video the trick of using a little bit of ATF plus force, so auto transmission fluid, in the bore, not the bore necessarily, but where the snap ring goes, and that actually helps the caps slide in a little bit easier, putting the U-joints together. Found that to be helpful. Also, now we're going to do the centering yoke, and with the centering yoke, this is a new part for me. It's what makes the double cardan a little bit more challenging, I guess. So this spicer part, you need to take this center plastic piece, it's not cardboard, take it out, and it is what is holding the needles in place. So again, needle bearings, you got to make sure those don't fall out. And then the spring is inside here, so you need to fish that out, and the spring will go in the center of the part here on the drive shaft. And I'm also going to put a good amount of grease all inside this cup to help everything function smoothly. So when you press this in, you should feel the center shaft on the drive shaft go in between the needle bearings, and you should be able to hear the outer part where the ball is sliding into the grease slinger rubber cup, and it should be a tight fit, which it is, and it's free to rotate in the direction that it needs to. So the most challenging part of this whole drive shaft, from what I've seen and what I've heard, is this next part, putting on this front U-joint. I'm going to try doing these sides first, and then putting the end caps on here on the centering yoke last, and we'll have to see how it goes. I think no matter which way you do it, it's a bit of a struggle, especially if it's the first time you're doing it like me. Now that I've got it all installed, let me tell you my secret. I have no idea. No idea. As you saw in the video, I was pressing, I got the cap in a little bit. I was pulling back on the top part here, and also just kind of moving it around, and at the same time pressing down on the cap. So if I did find a sweet spot, it would slide down, and I guess I found a sweet spot, and it slid down most of the way, and then it just took a little bit of tapping to get it to go, and again, moving the joint around to get it all to fit. So I guess just keep working at it and don't give up. One thing though, every time you take this cap back off, if you think you want to try again, inspect the cap and inspect the needle bearings. There's at least 3 or 4 times that the needle bearings had moved around. I had to reseat them. So don't go to all this trouble and have needle bearing problems because they're at the top of the cap and not on the side. So pay attention to those. Keep working on this, and at least for me, there was no secret magical trick. It was just playing with it. So now to go do the U-joint on the other end of the shaft. Well, I'm really excited to have all of the U-joints in place and the new centering yoke. It's a pretty big accomplishment for today. I'm gonna call it a day and then install the shaft on a different day. So I took some electrical tape and taped these 2 caps in place so I don't lose them while it's sitting over in the garage. And also just wanted to point out that the markings that used to be pink nail polish showed up great with the paint, so I'll know how this all goes back together when I throw it back on the Jeep. So when you're throwing this front drive shaft in, the way I did it is I didn't actually put the axle side into the yoke. I put it up above, so it keeps the drive shaft straight and level, and that makes it a lot simpler to get these bolts in. Don't forget your Loctite, and then these particular bolts get torqued to 240 inch-pounds. That's 20 foot-pounds. So torque these down, and then you can put the skid plate back on, but then also do the front end of the drive shaft, of course. And once you get the nuts and bolts in place, get them evenly snugged up, the final torque on the front here on the axle side is 168 inch-pounds. And then that'll be it. Put your skid plate back on, you're good to go to take it for a test drive.
Well, just got back from a test drive with TDSR, nice and smooth, up to 55 miles an hour. No pieces came flying off, so we'll call that a successful U-joint swap on the front drive shaft. Hopefully the video's been helpful and you learned a couple of things like I did on the double Cardan joint. If you want to keep learning along with me, just subscribe to the channel and there'll be lots of projects to come. Until that next time, we'll see you later. Have a good one.